All right, good morning, football fans. Welcome to another episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kevin Smith. It is a Tuesday, and we had sort of teased on yesterday's show where we looked at the 5 most intriguing storylines as NFL teams head to training camp this week, that today's show would be about the Shamar Stewart situation in Cincinnati. I'm actually going to move on to a different topic today, and I'll tell you why in a second. Today we're going to look at, I think, an equally interesting subject, which is the new coaches in the NFL. There are 7 of them. 7 teams have hired now new coaches, and we're going to rank them in terms of the pressure that each one faces to win this year. How much pressure are these new coaches under to win out of the gate? We'll rank them in increasing order from the least amount of pressure to the most. Before we do that, a quick word on the Shamar Stewart situation. So there was some news that bubbled up yesterday afternoon where Cincinnati's general manager and their ownership group traded barbs with Stewart's agent. If you're not sure what's going on, Shamar Stewart is holding out. He is their top draft pick, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. He's holding out because of some of the language in his contract, which has to do with player behavior clauses, their right to withhold money if he gets arrested, and then how bonuses would be paid out and guaranteed money. It's not your typical holdout because we just don't see too many of them anymore with the way that first round picks are slotted. But the thing that makes it so interesting is that Stewart is currently working out with his former teammates at Texas A&M, and he is making some noise about, if he can't get this situation resolved, potentially suing the NFL for the right to go back to college and play another year at A&M, despite the fact that he has already been drafted. Now, he hasn't taken a paycheck, and he hasn't been paid for anything, so technically, he hasn't even signed a contract. So technically, could he go back? And the way that's playing out makes it a very fluid situation. So I don't want to weigh in on something just yet. Let's give it a week to breathe and see where we are a week from now. But I will say this: if Shamar Stewart does go that route, sues the NFL, tries to get his eligibility back, plays another year in college, and he wins, then the model by which most NFL teams acquire their players via the draft is in serious jeopardy. So stay tuned to the Shamar Stewart situation. We will revisit in about a week. All right, let's talk about the subject at hand then. 7 new coaches in the NFL, 7 teams that hired new coaches this offseason, and they face varying degrees of pressure to be successful out of the gate. Let's rank them in descending order in terms of their pressure, or ascending order, I should say. At number 7, I think the guy with the least amount of pressure is the guy who was hired last, and that is Kellen Moore in New Orleans. I don't think Kellen Moore faces a ton of pressure for 2 reasons. One, yes, he was the last hire. The Saints had to wait until the Eagles finished their season. They obviously won the Super Bowl. So his availability was delayed, which of course delayed a lot of the process for Kellen Moore, his ability to hire coordinators and begin to get in and dig in and do the work that a head coach has to do. But I think the bigger reason is this: he's got by far the worst quarterback situation of any of these new hires. Kellen Moore's depth chart in New Orleans right now reads QB1 Tyler Shuck, who was their second-round draft pick out of Louisville, 26-year-old rookie who played for, I think, 3 or 4 different colleges, about 6 different offensive coordinators. That's either going to work tremendously to his benefit because he's going to have seen everything and he'll be able to adapt quickly to whatever New Orleans throws at him, or it's going to be a detriment because he hasn't had any consistency to get really good at a single thing. So who knows how it's going to work out with Tyler Shuck. And his backup, at least on the depth chart right now, is Spencer Rattler, who was a mid-round draft pick last year, played a little bit of football. But, I mean, he's got 2 really green, young, actually, Shuck's not that young in terms of experience, quarterbacks who he's going to have to develop. And you would have to think that New Orleans will be patient with Kellen Moore and allow him to do so. Now, Kellen Moore has been an extremely successful offensive coordinator throughout the league with 3 different teams, but look at who his quarterbacks have been. Most recently in Philly, where he had Jalen Hurts, previously with the Chargers, where he had Justin Herbert, and before that with Dallas, where he had Dak Prescott. So this is going to be a very different situation for him, just from a talent and experience perspective at the quarterback position. I don't think he's under a ton of pressure. Obviously, with any of these guys, if it's a complete train wreck, if the Saints go 1-16 and the locker room is a mess, etc., then any of these guys could get canned after a year. But Moore, it feels, has a really long leash. At number 6, Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, another offensive coordinator elevated to a head coaching position. Another guy who really made his bones in the league by being able to find success with quarterbacks. Liam Cohen did for Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay what the Jags are hoping he will do for Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence had a couple pretty good years at the beginning of his career, but the last couple of years he seems to have stalled, plateaued. And last year was a mess for Jacksonville. I mean, it was a mess for lots of reasons. Lawrence didn't play particularly well. You had dissension between head coach Doug Peterson and the locker room. There was a famous press conference after one of Jacksonville's games last year where Doug Peterson pretty much threw his whole team under the bus and was like, they just didn't play hard. They didn't play well enough. We're not that good. So Cohen faces the challenge of repairing a Jacksonville locker room, but chief amongst his duties as head coach will be to get Trevor Lawrence back on track. And I don't think that Jacksonville will see this as like a 1-year thing. I think that they'll see this as something that they're willing to give Cohen some time. It didn't happen overnight with Baker Mayfield in Tampa. He got better the more time that he spent with Liam Cohen. And Jacksonville is probably cognizant of that. Throw in the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars are arguably the least popular NFL team in their own area. I mean, Jacksonville gets farmed out to Europe a couple times a year for home games. Their games sometimes get blacked out in the Jacksonville area because they don't draw enough live viewers. I mean, that's not a team that screams, hey, there's a lot of pressure on you to win right now. At number 5, Aaron Glenn, New York Jets. Another guy who takes over a very dysfunctional locker room. Dysfunction is probably the best word to describe the situation in New York last season. Head coach Robert Saleh clashed with quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers didn't seem to have much respect for Saleh. Rodgers added to the dysfunction with some of his antics. The locker room sort of openly rebelled. There was a firing mid-season, then Jeff Ulbrich became the head coach. While this has nothing to do with the Jets, Jeff Ulbrich's son then got embroiled in that ridiculous prank calling scenario involving Shedeur Sanders during the draft. Again, not linked to the Jets, but it just feels Jets. It feels like dysfunction and chaos reigned in New York last season and has reigned in New York for a long, long time. In comes Aaron Glenn, a guy who did a masterful job in Detroit. I mean, the Lions went 15-2 last season, and their defense was an absolute mash unit. The injuries just devastated that unit, and Aaron Glenn was able to keep them together until the playoffs, unfortunately, where Washington gashed them for 40-plus points. But the coaching job that Aaron Glenn did in Detroit earned him a head coaching job in New York, and he is a Bill Parcells disciple. He is a guy who believes in structure and discipline and accountability. He is a guy who is no nonsense. He will certainly hold that locker room accountable. And so for Aaron Glenn, well, it would be nice if the Jets won some football games. If I had to target a number, 6, 7, 8 games, I think is where Aaron Glenn, 8 on the high end, maybe set the bar at 6. But I think the bigger thing is he's got to rebuild the culture there. Or maybe the term is build the culture, because, when have we ever said, hey, that Jets locker room has great culture? Maybe Parcells in the early 2000s or the late 90s was the last guy as a coach there to be able to establish a strong locker room. That will be Aaron Glenn's task. And then, of course, can they get Justin Fields playing good football, consistent football, etc.? But don't expect it to happen overnight. I would think that if you're the Jets and instability has been the order of the day for a long time, you're going to give Aaron Glenn a little bit of time. All right, now, as we get to number 4, now I think we're getting into some of the coaches who, as first-year guys, have a little more urgency to win. And I put Ben Johnson right on the middle of this list. Number 4 falls right in the middle of a list which includes 7 people, because I think his pressure level is a little greater than some of the others. Maybe not as much as the ones at the top of the list. Ben Johnson was the golden boy of this coaching class. Everybody wanted to talk to Ben Johnson in the offseason. Everybody wanted to land him. He was offered some head coaching jobs a year ago, turned him down to go back to Detroit. Heck of a run again with the Lions. Detroit, in his 4 seasons on the job, they went from 3-13-1 to 9-8 to 12-5 to 15-2. He, like a couple of the other coordinators here, did a phenomenal job resurrecting a quarterback's career, in this instance Jared Goff, who the Rams basically gave up on when they moved him to Detroit. Johnson has turned Goff into a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But he shocked some people when he went to the division rival Chicago Bears, when he chose the Bears as his head coaching destination. Shocked people. My son, a Detroit Lions fan, will not forgive Ben Johnson. So, I mean, people take this stuff seriously. When I had June Whitfield on the show a couple of weeks ago on our State of the Franchise episode, he runs the Bleachers to Speakers podcast, Lions podcast here on FFSN. He wouldn't say Ben Johnson's name. He just referred to him as that coach in Chicago. They take it personally when you leave them, but when you leave them for a division rival, it's like your girlfriend leaving you for your best friend. Or actually your arch enemy. That'd be a better analogy. But Ben Johnson comes to Chicago, and the Bears have high hopes for 2 things. One, that he'll be able to turn Caleb Williams into an upper echelon quarterback in the league. The Bears have not had a true franchise quarterback, unless you want to count Jay Cutler, in 40 years. In 40 years. It was 40 years ago that the 86 Bears won the Super Bowl behind Jim McMahon. And McMahon had a good run in Chicago. And you can go through the laundry list. I've read that list off here before on the call sheet. It is a who's who of forgettable starting quarterbacks. And the only name that really pops, there's 2 of them. One is Rex Grossman, because he somehow got the Bears to a Super Bowl. I mean, no disrespect to Rex Grossman when I say he's probably the worst starting quarterback to ever take a team to a Super Bowl. Now, I know that's going to sound disrespectful. I really don't mean it to be disrespectful. I just think that if you had to factually come up with a name, he'd be on the short list. He was not a franchise quarterback in Chicago. And then you have Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler had some good years, but was never a real elite quarterback. And the hope is that Ben Johnson will do that for Caleb Williams. He has a talented roster. There are good players at the skill positions. There are some big names on that roster. Can he get the Bears to win? They've had 8 double-digit losing seasons in the last 10 years. Can he do in Chicago what he helped do in Detroit? And because he's a big name and because they've got last year's number 1 draft pick, I think there's a little bit more pressure on him to win. I think a 6-11 season will be very disappointing in Chicago. I think he's got to be closer to 500, 8-9, 9-8. Making the playoffs is a tall order for Chicago because that division is loaded. I mean, Detroit, Minnesota, and Green Bay are all ahead of Chicago, no matter how you slice it. So that's a tall order, but I think he's got to get near 500. All right, number 3, Mike Vrabel in New England. Mike Vrabel, also a little bit of pressure because there's a lot of enthusiasm around Mike Vrabel, right? The so-called prodigal son is coming home. He was one of Bill Belichick's favorite players. He went on to have a head coaching career in Tennessee where he found some success, upset the Patriots. And after the unbelievable dysfunction of the 1 year that Jared Mayo was on the job, you want to talk about a guy who lost the locker room. Mike Vrabel as a culture builder is very attractive in New England. And New England has spent a lot of money this offseason bringing in free agents. I mean, they probably top just about any list you're going to find of teams who were aggressive in free agency or who acquired the most talent in free agency. And they're not loaded on offense. I mean, you've got Drake May, who did some good things as a rookie. You got Travion Henderson, I think is a really explosive running back out of Ohio State. A couple other weapons here and there. But Vrabel is a guy who builds a team from the inside out. And I think when I talk to Patriots fans, the Patriots think that he's a guy that can take them to an 8 or 9 win season right out of the gate. And I think that if he doesn't, because he's not in the same boat of Ben Johnson, that division's not very good. Buffalo's at the top, but Miami, New England, and the Jets are all in the same boat, I think. They could finish in second place in that division. I think there's a sense that maybe they should. So I think a little more pressure on Mike Vrabel because of the excitement and enthusiasm that he has generated in New England. Which brings us to our top two. Number 2, Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. And the urgency with Pete Carroll is a little bit different. And it's practical in nature. Pete Carroll is 74 years old. He will be in September when week 1 arrives. He is the oldest head coach in the history of the NFL. Pete Carroll, and I'm not trying, I don't want this to sound morbid, but he just doesn't have the time for this to be a long rebuild. He's got to turn this thing around fairly quickly. And he's leaning in on a tried and true recipe. It's a back to the future type recipe. They are doubling down on running the football and playing good defense. I mean, and that makes sense because look at his division. The other quarterbacks in his division are Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix. If you want to win football games in that division, don't let those guys have the ball. And if you don't want those guys to have the ball, then control time of possession. Run the ball. And the Raiders are loading up to do that. They drafted Ashton Genty. They brought in Chip Kelly, a run game guru, as their OC. Pete Carroll certainly made a name for himself with beast mode up in Seattle, running the football with a play action type quarterback in Russell Wilson. He's got a guy like that, similar in Geno Smith. They have a good defense, good pieces on that defense. Play great D, run the football, control time of possession, don't turn it over. That will be the recipe for Pete Carroll. A 3-win Vegas team playing in what could be the best division in the NFL. It's a tall task to turn it around quickly. I don't think he's a one and done, but he's also, again, 74 years old. You don't know what's going to happen there. I think they need to have success this season. What that means is probably debatable. Double their win total, get to 6 at least, maybe 7 wins. Maybe be in the mix late in the season for a playoff spot. I think those are the expectations that Pete Carroll is looking at. Which gets us to number 1. The guy with the most pressure, for lots of reasons, to win early in his head coaching career is Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas. Here, in a nutshell, here are the reasons why. 1, he's inheriting the most talented roster of any of the coaches we've just gone over. He's got the best quarterback in Dak Prescott. He's got the best receiving tandem in CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. He's got arguably the best overall player in Micah Parsons. This is a Dallas team that won 12 games just 2 years ago. Last year was a mess. But they have a very talented roster. They've made some moves this offseason to add to that talent. They are a high-profile franchise. They get put in prime time all the time. They could go 0-17, they'd still get 4 or 5 primetime games. People love the star on the helmet. They love the brand. They love to call Dallas America's team, even though they have not advanced past the divisional playoff in 30 years. They are seen as a marquee franchise. Their net worth is the greatest of any of the 32 NFL franchises, and their owner, Jerry Jones, is a meddlesome owner who likes to micromanage things and is, oh, by the way, 82 years old and wants to win another Super Bowl. and probably pick Brian Schottenheimer, at least many people think this, because of his ability to kind of control him. He's not a big name. He's a first-time head coach. If he had wanted a bigger name, he probably would have had a power struggle with that bigger name. And so he opted for a guy that will be very open to whatever suggestions Jerry Jones might make. That's the theory, and history says that theory is probably accurate. Brian Schottenheimer's got to win. If Dallas has a losing season, I can absolutely see him one and done. He's got to win. They cannot have a repeat of last year. They got to get into the playoffs. It would help if they won a playoff game. So, if there's pressure on any of these guys, it falls squarely on the shoulders of Brian Schottenheimer. Everybody else should probably have a pretty good, or be a pretty good bet on getting a second year at a minimum. Schottenheimer, if he doesn't get it done, I can absolutely see him one and done in Dallas. All right, training camp's ramping up. Players are starting to arrive, probably as we speak. It's going to be an exciting week. Keep it right here on the Call Sheet Daily. Our State of the Franchise episode on Thursday will be the Minnesota Vikings. David Stefano will be my guest. A lot of great stuff to talk about with the Vikings. Got a good Whiteboard Wednesday episode coming in tomorrow. So keep it right here. Until then, hope everybody has a great day. Go enjoy that summer sun, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Take care.